Hi everyone, this is Pierrick from P2design. In this new tutorial I will show you how to easily export a model from Blender to SketchFab and also how to convert your already made characters, even if they are complex, fixing the geometry and baking some nice texture using cycles. Let's get started. So the first thing you have to do is to create an account in SketchFab. It's totally free. I will let you guess how to do it. Just go on sketchfab.com and just sign in and follow the steps. Once you've done it, you will be able to access your profile here. But first of all, let's launch Blender. In my case, I use an empty scene, so you just have to select all by pressing A and X to remove everything from this scene. And in the add-on panel, there is a built-in exporter, which is better than, more handy than using exportation with OBJ file or thing like this, because the add-on will do it for you. So just type sketch here and you will find the add-on. It's activated. Now here I have this upload option. So there are a few options here, and you have this API key that is very important. To find it, you may have received an email with it, but if you've lost it, just go here in your profile, my settings, and here password and API, and it is right here. Just select it, copy and paste it in Blender. And the cool thing about it is that it will keep record of this API key next time you start Blender. You don't need to control U and save your startup file. It will be inside Blender. So now about the exportation, how it works. If I add a cube and a season, for example, here you have those options selected. For the models, you can export what is selected, as here, everything is selected, or all the models. In this case, I can use both options. And if you are using lamp in Blender, you can do the same thing. So I don't have any lamp, so I can let it like this. I will select none. I won't be using lamps in Blender for this tutorial. We will use them to create some variation in the lighting of our models, but we will take those lamp effects. So now I can give it a title, test, a description, it's a test, and some tags that will help people to find your model when they are on SketchFab. If they are looking for a cube and a monkey, I advise you to type cube and monkey and just separate them with spaces. Okay, just press space. So cube, Suzanne, etc. And here I will keep it private. If you don't want to share it in the first launch, when you are testing it and setting it, it's better to set it to private, but you can do this in SketchFab and set a password to it. So now I have done this, I will click upload, wait for a few seconds, and now I have a message here telling me that the upload is complete. I go into my web browser, my models, and I can see this new one here. We will activate this little option button, go in the 3D settings, and I have my scene here. So I have two objects. You can't select them, okay? but you may accept to have different materials for these two objects. But here I only have one material, that is a root material. When I change the color, I can see it in my viewport, but both objects have the same material, and I can't add a new material and apply it to any of those. So the most important thing is, if you want to use different material setting, you have to do it first in Blender. Just create them. You don't need to aim in cycles. You can do it in Blender render. It doesn't have any importance here. You just have to give them a name. And here Suzanne, so that when you upload it again, so it's very handy with this model because it's very light. I exit here this viewport. In my models, I will see a new one here. Go in the 3D settings, and now I have something. Note that we have some reflection here, very powerful ones, but I usually don't set the material into Blender because it's very hard to guess what will happen in SketchFab. I prefer to set everything in SketchFab then. But now the cool thing is that I have a shader called Cube and a shader called Suzanne as in my blend scene. So that's it. You know now how to separate your object, or at least your shaders, and that's the important thing. It's all about the shaders. I could have joined those both elements in a same object, but setting the color here show me that I have two different shaders, and they will appear in SketchFab. So this is the very first important trick to know about SketchFab. So now let's imagine you have created a character made for Blender exclusively for animation, something pretty complex, even with multiple objects, with a cycled shader here, and even a rigging. And you want to make this for SketchFab. First thing to prepare is the geometry of our model. So here I have a few modifiers. I have a subsurf modifier which is disabled, so I will just increase it here so that you can see the difference. It is driven by a displacement map, just to have some details here. So you may try to keep your models below 10,000 faces for SketchFab. You will see other models with a lot more faces, but it's not super relevant as it will really slow down the loading process of SketchFab, and some people may not be able, without a good computer, to see your work. And the important thing is to spread your work all over the world. Okay, that's the most important thing, to have feedback from everyone. And also you can understand this as preparing a model for a video game, for example. So I will get rid of my subsurf modifier here. I have kept the displacement as it gives some little deformations that are based on a baked displacement. So it is very subtle here, but it does give my model some variation that I want to keep. So I will try to apply it, and it tells me that modifier cannot be applied to a mesh with shape keys. And now if I check my shape keys, I have a bunch of corrective shape keys here used to blend deformation when using the rigging on the muscles and stuff like this. If you check this one, for example, you can see the muscle being contracted when the arm is getting to this point. And I do want to keep this deformation, but I have to get rid of all the shape keys. So if I got rid of them, just like this, the problem is that it will they will disappear, the effect will disappear. If I remove them, you just see that Control Z, there is a modification in my in the shape of my character, and I'm using a bunch of shape keys for the fingers, the knees, the hips, the face, etc. I don't want to lose them. So what we have to do is create a new shape key here. Oh, sorry. Click here and select new shape key from mix. And this will create a shape key that will inherit all the movement or all the shape key deformation that are here. So now I can get rid of all those shape keys. And also this one that was used, that is unused here. And now if I push this shape key, I recover the deformation I wanted to blend those shapes properly. Now if I got rid of this one, of the base that is used to drive this shape key, and now this one, I've kept my mesh with those deformation, and now I can apply all my modifiers like the displace and the armature. And now I have a base mesh. I can even get rid of all those objects. I have a mesh here that is editable as I want. So I have my model here that is now a simple mesh without any modifiers. I can see my cycles shaders working fine here. So what I want to source will be the normal map, the emission map, and at least the diffuse. Then you can also use, for example, the glossy path to create some glossiness color inside SketchFab. But for the time being, we will only use a diffuse, the normal map, and the emission shader. If I now jump and check my node here, I will select the first map, Alt Z, and I can see my emission map. If I click on this one, it automatically updates and show me my base color, which is my diffuse map, my normals, etc. The problem is that I'm using 8K maps here, and this is going to be a little maybe too big for SketchFab. It will make very heavy files, and my model will take decades to be loaded. So 4K maps are decent, and I advise you not to go that's upon this value. If I got back to my emission here, I see my raw emission shader, but on the render I can see that I have made some variation of this map. So what will be interesting here will be to bake again this emission map using the whole node tree here. Also for my diffuse map here, I may want to use other implementation, like having shadows, having AO, etc. If I use this base color, my model will look a bit flat in SketchFab, even if there is an emulation of the shadows and specularity. Creating them as a map is better, I believe, because you will be able to give directional shading to your model. You will be able to add more lighting to your model, etc. If we now check the Titan model inside SketchFab, I can see that I have some shadow here projected from the head of this model. So I believe there is a directional lighting here, but also those nice reflection due to the lava emission here. And this is what we are going to reproduce on this new model I'm preparing. So I won't be covering the preparation of this base, because it's exactly the same process. You just have to model it, create your shaders, bake the map, etc. But what is interesting here is to have this lighting. So I will try to recreate it in Blender. So what I have done before was just on this field there was a hole, and I just add a plane with an emission shader, emission with an orangey color. And if I bump up the strength of this plane, I have this effect here, those nice reflection. And this is pretty interesting. So I will push it to 7. No, 5 was good. And now we will check our lamps. I have this one, this key lamp, and this fill lamp here. So those could be interesting because they project shadows here that are nice. So I want my SketchFab model to have this directional lighting, but I don't want it to be, I have added some ray lightning here to have those nice borders, but as we will be able to turn around the model, these are not relevant anymore. So I will get rid of them. And this will be my base model for SketchFab. I will also get rid of, no, I will keep the stone. I will keep the stone, but I will add a simple sphere instead. So I will add this, a shader called sphere. So when we export it, there will be options to be tweaked here. So I have my Titan ready and lighted for SketchFab. Let's now work with texture baking and create textures that will replace the one in our shader here. I have opened the two base maps we will be using for the SketchFab models here in Photoshop. I have my base color here and my Titan normal OpenGL here, which is my Titan normals, but it's in 16 bits, and I think this makes it very heavy. So as told, for the sake of this tutorial, I will be using a 2K map to make it running a little faster. So switch to 2K, here also 2K, and I will modify it's betrayed by 8 here. So I will lose some information, but for a real-time 3D that will be way enough. And I will save those maps. So now what we want is add those lightning information from our environment, and we also want our emission map here. So as I'm working with 2K map, I will create a new image in the UV image editor, pressing the plus button here. Call this Titan Baker. Use a 2K size and keep it empty. I will save this image here as Titan Baker. Save the image. And now in cycles, we will prepare our model for baking. So the first thing you have to do is add our baker target, which is our image texture. So texture, image texture, and keep it active. I will select my Titan Baker here. And now whatever I will bake will be written on this texture. So first thing I want is to bake my emission. So if I follow this, I can see that my emission is currently not randomized. It's randomized here. So I may be able to use this as a strength for my emission shader. And now I can see that it's like I want. So I will just add a matte multiply that will allow me to increase the strength of my emission. So here it's an emissive, but if you have other thing to bake, just try to find where your shader is mixed in your wall character shader and isolate it. Now I will plug it as the surface shader, and you don't really need to do so, but that's for the sake of this tutorial, because if I plug it here and in the bake option I will select emission, he will just select everything that is emitting from my character. So even if those are mixed, it's the same. So I will use this one onto the surface, and now in my baking option here in the render stack bake, I will select emit. I will use a 4 pixel margin. That's enough, as there is no modifiers on our model. The margin will be around the current exported mesh. So I don't need to select, to click select to active, etc. And off cycles bake, it uses the same properties as the render. So as I'm using GPU, I will keep those tiles at 256. And the sampling, as it is an emission pass, it doesn't need many samples to be rendered. So I can reduce the baking sample here to 20. I will have exactly the same result, but it will render really faster. So just make sure to click your target image texture so that it is active. This is very, very important. And click bake. Now I have this progression bar here, and when I open the UV image editor, after it told me that baking map is done, I have my baked emission map here. So I can save it, Titan emission, save, and we will use it then in Photoshop. So the other thing I want to bake those nice reflection, and I also want these shadows. And a good path that combines both of them when you have a diffuse shader is to use the diffuse direct here. And you will have those highlights and also the shadow. Or you can bake the shadow on a separate image using the shadow path. We will also use the ambient occlusion, and we will see in Photoshop how we can mix them. I just want to give a try to this rendering with a light here. So I will add a lamp, area lamp, rotate it and move this a little down, and move this on another layer so that it doesn't bother me. Shift Z to see if it doesn't get more epic with a lamp like this. The emission, I will turn it to orangey, and we will compare, but I think it's better because it will also cast shadows onto my model when using this lamp, while the display doesn't. It makes like a soft lighting here. I can use both eventually, and now I think it looks better with those very strong highlights here. So that's just check how you want to light your model, etc. And this is if you want to simulate environmental lighting, not in SketchFab but before, so that in SketchFab you will just use the lighting to play on the gamma value of your model and highlight some reflection to show the geometry of your model. So I'm happy with this lighting. I will keep the shader this way. I will click my Titan Baker again to be sure that it is selected. And as I'm using diffuse direct now, I will just bump up the samples to 500, which is enough in my case, I believe, and click bake. So now I have baked my diffuse direct lighting here, and I'm very happy with the result because we can see the shadows here projected and also our bright reflection here. So this is really what I was looking for. I will save this as Titan diffuse here, and we won't use it as it is, but we will combine it to our base texture here to create our shading. I won't be using the PBR full stacks of options available in SketchFab, but I will also explain you how you can use them. So in Photoshop, I will close this. You can go into File, Script, and load file into layers, and I can select all my layers here, not the baker, and click OK, and it will automatically merge them on the same map. So now my emission can be put here and set to addition or whatever kind of lightning fusion mode you like, blending mode, sorry. So this one is cool, as it will affect my diffuse color, and as we will add this emission shader in SketchFab, I will keep it like at 60%. That will be enough. Then I will put my diffuse direct here on top of it and say to overlay. So now I have those nice shadows here. I will zoom in. Sorry, like this. We can see the shadows here. But the problem is that it doesn't make my highlights here very nice. And my shadows are a bit too strong, so I will push it down to 50. Like this, or maybe 60. Okay, I like it like this. And then I will duplicate it, switch it to normal, and I will check how I can push the highlights using a curve, for example. So I will make everything really darker, but the highlights. Try to isolate them. I will just hide everything here and work on a dark background and push its value to 100% here. So now I have those parts that are highlighted. I will just work on the curve to get rid of the grayish part. Okay, this way is good, I think. I have some highlights from my lamp on top of the model. And if I switch this to addition, for example, it looks pretty nice. But I will have to make some color variation because it turns really reddish, but it can be interesting. And also my ramp here make it really burny, and I don't like it that much, so I will have a hue and saturation. So here I'm trying to find a good value. That's just a matter of testing and separating the stuff. Like when you are doing post-production, there is no straight way to do things. You have to test. So I like it this way now. So if I check my base color before and now, I have way more information here, for example. I will just add another curve for this whole stuff and just make it a little lighter because it always looks a bit too dark. And I will keep my black area black. I will save this as a PSD file. Sketch tutorial. And we will use this map, and it will be our new Titan base for SketchFab. So I won't flatten the other one and get rid of it. Just use this one. Also, what we can do for weight sake is the emission map. Add a black background and flatten it so that I can save it without any transparency information. It will make it lighter, and we don't need it for SketchFab. And now we can test this map in Blender to check how it works, how it looks, sorry. Oh, I have a bunch of windows open. So if I go in my 3D view here, instead of my Titan Baker here, I will load the Titan Bake SK02 base, sorry, 02. And now if I switch to texture viewport and have it selected, it will appear. And we can see this reflection here. But I have my viewport shading here that I don't really like. So I can switch to viewport rendering, Control Shift, click it. And now I have my values to 1 because it's thanks to the node wrangler, it's going through an emission shader. Now I can see my model. Without any light, I can remove all the other layer. I have absolutely no light effects here. It's just the texture we have created we're seeing here. In SketchFab, we will add a little of reflections to bump up those nice relief, creases, etc. And just add another layer of emission for our lava and make it glowing. So my model here is ready. I will just make sure that this shader won't be used because I don't know exactly how it reacts, how it is converted to SketchFab. I will try to study if you can create shaders in Blender and export them to SketchFab then. So I will just get rid of everything here, save my model, go into upload, Titan tutorial, description, tutorial, and add Amber Titan tutorial. My API key is available. I will just move this on the same layer, check that it has a separated shader name, select everything, use models selection, lamps I will click none, and click upload. So now if I go in my models, okay, I should see this Titan tutorial picture. I go in the 3D setting, give it some time to load, and now I can see my base model here. So now we will be able to play with the materials, lighting, and all those settings. So we are now editing our model in SketchFab. The first thing I will do is switch to Renderer Classic, as we have made a lot of light simulation in Blender. Using a PBR won't be that relevant. PBR is like creating a full shader inside SketchFab and use only SketchFab lighting to render it. So as we have cheated, we will use this one. So we will directly jump into lightning, and we have here an HDR image, sorry. So it doesn't really fit my lighting and the ambient I want. So we have here a big list. And for this model, I like to use the arc pin tree here and change the orientation of this map on the Z-axis so that it kind of fits my Blender lighting. So we were like this in Blender, and we had the lighting in this way, like this, and here an emission. So we will try to reproduce it in SketchFab. So here it is. I can play with the brightness, and also I can replace this background, which I found annoying for this picture, to a simple gray background. And we will use additional lighting here. We will use first a point lamp with a slightly orangey color, and we will place it between the feet our creature so that we kind of mimic the lightning we had in Blender. We won't use the emission lamp as it will make too much global illumination added to the HDR here, so I will just hide it. And the directional lighting, we will, so I can't move it here, but I want it to be facing my character, so I will make the environmental lighting, sorry, less powerful so that I can see what I'm doing. And here this way I like it. So this directional lighting will follow the camera rotation, so it will highlight our model, while the HDR will be the main lighting. So I will get back to this value, for example. And before we go further, we will edit our Titan material. So for the sphere, I will just switch the diffuse color to something darker. And as you can see, it has kept the flat shading we had in Blender, where here it's in smooth shading mode, as in Blender. And I will select the Titan here and start playing with it. So the first thing I want to do is enable the normals and import my texture. So I'm in my texture folder. I select the one we will be using and click import. Oh, sorry, it's already imported. Select the normal map here, and you see all those nice details appearing. Even with only a 2K normal map, it looks really nice, with a good value between details versus weight of the map. Now we will add in our diffuse the one we have baked. So I select texture, and here it is. So it's a bit dark here, so maybe we can slightly increase the lightning, the HDR lightning, and a bit my directional lightning. Okay, not that much. Now for the specular, you can use a map, but I will use simple color, as I just wanted to, it's stone, so it's not really shiny, and I just want to push the creases and all the relief on my model here. So I will increase the color, and it's really rapidly turned to be very shiny, and it's due to the environmental reflection. You have to make it really lower, like 10 maximum, and then the glossiness is more like the roughness of the model. So here it turns really sharp, while here it's more diffuse, and I want it to be pretty rough so that we can see the geometry here thanks to the normal map, but it doesn't look too shiny. And then reduce my color here to make it really subtle. And also the environmental, I will reduce it because it creates some noise here. Okay, now I can see my details. I think it's still too shiny here, so I will reduce it. Okay, make it really subtle. Now light map, I don't have any light map, but you could have used the AO, for example. And as we have baked the diffuse direct here on its model, and combine it to the diffuse color in Photoshop, I don't need to use light map. So if I change the color here, it turns to be really dark. But if you use the AO, for example, here combined to a shadow map, you can give directional lighting to your model, or just ambient occlusion. The transparency, if you are using any transparency, it's not the case here. But the emission here, we'll use our emission texture. And now we can see, we can see here, for example, the difference when it's available or not. And this will be also enhanced thanks to the glowing in the post-production. And here, faces rendering. If you are, it's to have the culling of the faces. So if you have two-sided plane, using, for example, you make a flag and want to be able to see it from both sides, it's better to keep it enabled, but as my mesh is closed, I don't need it, so I will just use single-sided. Maybe it will enhance the performances of the SketchFab engine. So in the lightning here, I'm pretty happy with the result, and we will just go into post-production, because there is post-production inside SketchFab and it really makes the difference. As usual, a raw render can be very, very nice, but with a good post-production it can make your artwork be really like a masterpiece or something. It really makes the difference. I don't know any artists that don't use post-production to enhance their work. So here in the post-processing filter, we have the sharpness that is like the high pass in Photoshop that we will use at the very last step. The bloom, which is the first one that is interesting for us, and you can see the difference with and without. It makes those nice glowy effects, but here it is too strong, so even the white parts here are glowing. So I will make the threshold lower. We can increase the intensity to our taste, so I will not make that much, and the radius just to see how large it glows. So the bad thing here is that I may have used a lighter emission map instead of using a colored emission map. I should have used a black and white one, so that the emission would have been more strong in inheriting the color of the diffuse material, and I would have this glowing effect also from my emission. But it doesn't matter here, you just know it, and you will have to make some tests. But really, I really have this kind of epic sense thanks to this lightning from below, sorry. The tone mapping is a super cool effect. So here it doesn't change anything. You can increase the exposure, the brightness, contrast, so very classical. But if you switch to filmic, it's just amazing. I believe I'm kind of an old-fashioned guy, so I like very contrasted stuff and maybe a bit too saturated. And if you compare linear and filmic, it really gives a lot of contrast to your model. I really like it. So we don't really need to change values here. We may be able to reduce the saturation if you want something like I don't know, something like an old school style film. It's really an interesting filter here. And the exposure, so classical, I will increase it a little, increase the saturation, and I'm pretty happy here with the result. The color balance, as usual, you can make some color correction here. So maybe I want my I will just maybe I want my highlights, which are too orangey, to be a little more bluish or something like this. So you have to check and make your own setting here. And we will just have a look to the wireframe. You don't need to set it because you can set it in the viewport then when showcasing your model. But maybe you can set the size of the wireframe. I haven't even checked this. And finally, in the post-processing, the sharpness is really nice. It will give your model kind of an illustration feeling. So by default, it's always very strong. So a value of 5 or okay 12 here. Let's compare with and without. so you make it sharper. I can increase it a little here, and I have this nice illustration style here. It might be a bit too strong, but okay, just showcase you the option you have. Also, my specularity is really too strong, so I will reduce it here like this, and also decrease this value, the environmental reflection. Very hard for me to say because I'm French. Okay, so it looks nice now, I think. So last steps, you can add annotation to your model. So double click on your model to create annotation here, I don't know, okay, and then you can move it, so when people see your models, they can click on the annotation to see it. I believe you can just get rid of it. Materials were done here. Lighting also, I'm pretty happy with the result. So what I will do is just take a snapshot of my model here by clicking saving view, and this will create a thumbnail in SketchFab. And now I will click save setting and wait until it's done. So now when I check my model in SketchFab, I can see it, and it's now open to comments, like, etc. And when I go here, it seems it doesn't take correctly the snapshot view as before for the thumbnail, but that's fine. Here you can see an example. I may have not wait long enough to prepare it. So as you can see, it's a pretty light model. It takes like 10 seconds to load. So here it was faster because my maps were already loaded in the cache file of my browser. So just a little overview of the PBR. So if I switch to PBR, first the lighting, I will disable this and reduce the brightness of the environment, and you may use only one of those. Also, I will switch off the post-processing, and we will just check the material. So there are a lot of options here. You can play with using a based metalness or specularity. Here specularity would have been more obvious, and instead of the baked texture I've used, I may load and I will load it just to test my base Titan here color. Oh, I'm on the sphere, sorry for the Titan. So it gives here a color. The specularity is just really covering it. So you have to play with a lot of options here, but you can find your normal map, you can find your ambient occlusion, so you can bake those maps easily in Blender. And there is this cavity map. To create the cavity map, you can bake in Blender the pointiness factor, for example, and I will show you that there is a lot of tutorials about it on the web. So I have destroyed everything before. I will add an input geometry. I have the pointiness here, and if I add a color ramp here, Control Shift click here, Shift Z, you can use this to create your cavity map, or use the base sculpt model with high definition sculpting to really have those creases, etc., and kind of reproduce the shader you have made inside cycles. And whenever you are using a roughness value with variation, try to bake those maps. I'm trying to recover, okay, my node setting here, but here I'm using a lot of stuff like this pointiness value, which is the specular factor. So in the creases, I don't want the light to be shiny as it is lava, so it has no specularity, roughness, etc. And this roughness is might be plugged in a bunch of elements here. So I have a lot of values, and I can create a baked texture based on this to drive those. So with the PBR, you're closer to cycles, and you will have to maybe use more textures, but it will allow you to have more control and to give SketchFab the end on the rendering. You're not faking lightning like I have done on the previous model, but you're really creating everything. So I will try to make maybe later another tutorial about this, but I need to study it more in depth to give you better information. But it seems to be able to deal with Fresnel effect, etc. And I know there are some Fresnel's option here. So PBR maps are really nice to be used, and I think this is kind of the future. So I hope you've enjoyed this this tutorial, and that it will help you to showcase your model in SketchFab, because when you have spent so much time creating a nice model, you can see that with 1 or 2 hours of working, you can showcase it in real-time 3D, and it really makes the difference in your portfolio. So have fun with this, and see you next time.